Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the original custodians of these lands. The people of the rivers and the hills have walked these lands for thousands of years as well as today, and we pay respect to the elders of the past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Apologies and leaves of absence. So we have Ian Ellett, the Director of Infrastructure Services, is an apology, and we have Greg Warlow acting. Sally Rice is also an apology, the Director of Community and Economic Development, with Jess Reid acting. In accordance with Council's Governance Rule 26, we now have two councillors that we need to admit to the meeting. We'll do that as two separate motions. Can I just confirm, can both of the councillors vote on that motion? Can I just confirm that with Annabelle Harding, our Governance Coordinator?
Thanks, Mayor Price. If a councillor is not yet admitted to the meeting, they cannot vote on the item. Once they are admitted to so when the first councillor is admitted to the meeting, they can then vote on the subsequent motion.
Great. So Councillor Burke and Councillor Horn, you can't vote on that first item, and then we'll update you from there. So the recommendation, councillors, is that Council approve Councillor Burke's attendance via electronic means in accordance with Governance Rule 26F. Do I have somebody to move that? Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Does anyone wish to speak? Otherwise, I'm just going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So Councillor Burke, you can now participate in the next vote because you have been admitted to the council meeting. So the second recommendation is again in accordance with Council's Governance Rule 26. Councillor Horn has made a request in writing to the CEO to attend this meeting via electronic means due to health reasons. Upon approval by Council, Councillor Horn will be admitted to the meeting. The recommendation is that Council approve Councillor Horn's attendance via electronic means in accordance with Governance Rule 26F. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Would anyone like to speak to that? No? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So Councillor Horn and Councillor Burke are now both admitted to the meeting. Item 4 is declarations of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflict of interest for the meeting tonight? None? Item 5 is open forum. So we have one question, and I'll confirm that you're in the gallery tonight, Jane. Thank you. So please find below my question that I would like addressed at the open forum at the next council meeting on the 29th of June. The question relates to the subdivision development at 29 Tomlinson Road, Beechworth. So the question is, with the approved staged approach of 29 Tomlinson Road, when will council require Tomlinson Road to be upgraded to the approved standard IDM low density rural residential? We are concerned that if this doesn't occur prior to stage 1, there will be significant issues with the road, namely the amount of dust created with the construction of 5 to 7 dwellings and associated infrastructure, and significant safety concerns with additional vehicles and trucks using the current single lane unsealed road. I'll direct that question to the Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you for the question. So in short, the road upgrade will happen as part of stage 1. So it needs to be finished before stage 1 can be signed off. And importantly, that means that the road will be in place before houses are constructed. There's a number of other conditions that relate to the road, and then the control of sediment and dust and other things. And I've sent that through on a separate email. I think that was earlier in the week.
Thank you, councillors. That's all the questions that we have for open forum tonight. Item 6 is community and council achievements. Councillor Horn, you had a community achievement that you wanted to raise with the council meeting.
It is a great pleasure to congratulate long-term Indigo resident, Mr. Grant Gilman, on reaching the wonderful milestone of his 100th birthday. Grant is a proud fourth-generation local whose life has truly been woven into the history of Rutherglen children and the wider Indigo community. Over the past century, he has been a farmer, a contractor, a volunteer, and a tireless community advocate, always willing to roll up his sleeves and help wherever needed. He helped establish essential services around the Chiltern area and spent decades serving with the SES, Neighbourhood Watch, Meals on Wheels, and many other community organisations. One of Grant's most enduring contributions has been his unwavering commitment to improving safety in Main Street, Rutherglen, working alongside other community leaders to advocate for change for more than 50 years. On behalf of Indigo Shire Council, please accept our warmest congratulations, Grant, together with our sincere thanks for a lifetime of service, commitment, and community spirit. We wish you a very happy 100th birthday, upcoming birthday, and our very best wishes for the years ahead. Mayor Price, can I please request a letter under seal be sent to Mr. Gilman?
Yes, thank you for raising that with the council meeting, Councillor Horn. And I think that would be most appropriate, and we'd all echo the sentiment that you've just put to the meeting tonight. So thank you for raising that on our behalf. And we certainly wish Mr. Gilman a happy birthday and thank him for his incredible contribution to the community over that time. So thank you again for raising that, Councillor Horn. Do we have any other community or council achievements for the meeting? No? Any condolence motions, councillors? None? Item 8 is confirmation of minutes from the previous meetings. Before I go to that item, CEO, can I just confirm for transparency for the councillors and also for those watching along at home, so the view that we have of this meeting in the chamber to accommodate 2 councillors by electronic means is that we can see them. They're visible to councillors and staff in the council chambers, but I understand that the view for those watching along at home is that they will see whoever has the speaker view, and so won't necessarily have the 2 councillors in view at all times. The reason to confirm that is to just make sure that we are meeting our governance rules in terms of who needs visibility for when a vote is taken.
That's correct, Mayor Price. So basically the governance rules require that the councillors who are attending by electronic means must be able to be seen by all councillors and staff and members of the public who are physically present in this meeting. So you can all see both Councillors Horn and Burke from the room here, which is fine. And viewers at home will be able to see them when they speak, but when they don't speak, this software program is putting them into the background and they're not being seen in between their speaking roles, and that's okay with the governance rules.
Thank you, CEO. So item 8 is confirmation of minutes from previous meetings. The recommendation is that the following minutes be confirmed. 1, minutes of the council meeting held on the 19th of May 2026, as published on council's website. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dowsley, do you wish to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to speak to the motion? No other councillors. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9 is business arising from previous minutes, and there are no reports. Item 10 is petitions, and item 10.1 is the petition called Make Polluters Pay. The recommendation is that Council 1 supports the Australian Local Government Association's vote on the motions on this topic at the National General Assembly, and 2 continues to advocate for improved funding to help adapt to a changing climate. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Landells, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landells would like to speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Price. So Council's received a petition with 289 signatures, and this particular petition has been gathered by volunteers from a local community group, Indigo Regen. They're a group that have been formed for less than 2 years, and I'd like to acknowledge the work that they've put in here at a grassroots level. I guess they're taking the initiative to recognise that our council, like so many small rural councils around Australia, simply cannot afford to allocate ratepayer funds for the ongoing climate change impacts, which include, just for example, damage to infrastructure, roads, bridges, culverts, drainage, etc. And as we so very well recall, less than 4 years ago during a flood, I think at one stage at its height, I counted about 5 bridges or culverts that were out across the Shire. And some of them were on state roads, but some of those were also on local roads as well. So, and that's just, I suppose, the infrastructure type damage, but there's also a lot of work that goes into community resilience support programs that arise during climate change adversity. And I think that, so that the impacts are very big. So yeah, really appreciate the fact that the Indigo Region volunteers have given up their time. They've gone out into the community to gather a lot of signatures and also liaise with council over several weeks and the governance team in working out exactly how they had to lodge their petition. And I feel that it's quite a mature conversation that we've been able to have with this community group, acknowledging that there is a funding gap challenge and aligning on a strategy to address it. This particular petition also is consistent with Indigo Shire's advocacy plan. It's a priority in that particular plan, and is also, as the report suggests, at the 7th of May meeting of the IEAC, our Advisory Committee on Environment Matters. And so a recommendation came to our last council meeting, which is worded very similar to the 2 points in this particular motion. So thank you. That's what I'd like to say there.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, I just again reiterate what Councillor Landell said. We often get petitions with people complaining about something that we're doing. Or something that they would, the community would like our support on, and it's not very often we get one where they're saying we're here. We get that there's a problem. We get that you don't have enough money from our rates to handle what's going on at the moment with climate-induced weather patterns, bushfire, floods, and the infrastructure costs around that. So it's quite delightful to receive a petition that has, and I look through the names, and they're everyone we know that's out there doing great advocacy for Indigo Shire. They're all on committees. They're all involved. They're all, they're all the people we know who are very active. So firstly, just want to say thank you so much for seeing that there's a gap there, for recognising it, and for doing this petition. I note that we say that we're going to be doing advocacy on this, but in some way I'd like to see and explore if there's an opportunity for us to show the federal government that we have got this large really for this Shire petition asking for this compensation fund so that it's used beyond us, because I think it's a really valuable tool. So I think there's more discussion to be had there. I just also want to say that this, it's now recognised nationally, and a motion led by the City of Sydney and adopted through the Australian Local Government Association did a similar vote, and I think it at the national conference it was backed unanimous, unopposed support, making a clear unified position of local government. So it reflects a growing consensus across Australian councils that climate costs are rising faster than local government revenue. The burden on ratepayers and councils is unsustainable, and a new funding model is required to support local adaptation and resilience. So I think there are three very simple things that we're asking for, and really appreciate the community backing us and combining with our voice on this. And hopefully we can use your voice in further advocacy. Thanks.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to say, so yes, I'm the delegate at the National General Assembly to vote on that. And so the way that took place was that there was a whole range of motions, of course, from right across Australia. This motion was moved as it was en bloc. So there was quite a number of motions that are all consistent with the Australian Local Government Association's current position, which I think is really a great thing, that that the Australian Local Government Association does have a really strong and clear unified position, and that a motion similar to this, the wording did change, was able to be adopted at that level. And to the points that Councillor Landales and Shepherd made, I'd echo that. I think I'd really congratulate the community members that have been involved in this petition for working with us in a really pragmatic way to see what are the avenues that we can support something like this through. Sometimes they can be clunky, sometimes they're not as exactly as you might anticipate, but we've tried to cooperate as best we can to raise an issue like this in the appropriate forums. I hope our national advocacy fits the bill on that, but we also take our role locally very seriously as well. That's why we've declared a climate emergency, and that's why we've got much of our work working towards that at this point in time. So thank you to that group. And as we say, we'll continue to advocate in this space, and interested to where we can take this motion and the petition next. Any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Landales, as the mover. Would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Mayor Price. Really, I think I'd just like to acknowledge the point you made about the National General Assembly, and also Councillor Shepherd also made that point too. Yeah, it's really, I guess, that's an Australian local government conference, so it's all councils right around Australia. So to see a motion like this get carried at that level, I think is really significant. And it's also understanding that we often, sometimes at local government level, we feel a little bit powerless to higher levels of government. And having such strong support for a motion like this is a great thing. And obviously, we now look forward to seeing how the ALGA, how they can continue to pursue this at a federal level.
Thank you, Councillor Landales. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11 is Planning and Corporate Services, and item 11.1 is the Council Plan 25 to 29 Year 2 update. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes that no submissions were received during the 21-day exhibition period from Wednesday the 20th of May to close of business Tuesday the 9th of June 2026, and 2, adopts the Council Plan 2025 to 2029 Year 2 update. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd.
So councillors, directors and managers have reviewed the council plan action plan to assess whether any phasing adjustments or new actions are warranted for year 2. And we also sent it out to the community to look at the council plan, which of course they were part of developing. And we had no feedback from the community. And so we're just reflecting, I imagine, that with this strong alignment between the council plan actions and the budget and the community feedback and no submissions, that we're just going to plough ahead with the council plan as it is, no changes.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Mayor Price. Just briefly, well, it's our roadmap or how we map out. We're going to work on capital works and plan our services and allocate our money, our resources towards all of these things we're expected to do by the community. And the community did have 21 days to comment on it. And I thought if somebody really objected to it, they would have got into that period. So I'm proud to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.2 is consideration of the 2026-27 budget submissions. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the attached draft budget responses and thanks submitters for their assistance and feedback, and 2 endorses the recommended responses detailed in this report, and 3 makes no changes to the budget as a result of the submissions. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank the community members who took the time to make submissions on the draft budget. This is exactly how the process is intended to work. Our community provides the input and we consider that when making our budget decisions. It is true that Council develops the draft budget using a wide range of information very early in the process. However, detailed feedback on individual projects is specifically sought after the draft budget is released, and this provides the community with an opportunity to comment on proposed projects before the budget is adopted. I'd just like to make a couple of comments on some of those submissions. In regards to the second submission, as I said at last month's meeting, I believe there is insufficient alignment between proposed projects and Council's strategic priorities. I would like to see future budget papers clearly identify the strategic plan or strategy from which each capital project has originated. The submission questions our process for developing deliverable strategic plans. Some of our plans are very aspirational, and I think that they should be. I think that we need to be aspirational because we never know what grant opportunities may arise. So we need to have our plans reflecting our aspirations in case opportunities do come up. But I take on board that feedback. I also share concerns raised by submitter 5. In several of our towns, weeds and faded signage are among the first things that greet residents and visitors. I believe we can and should do better within our existing operational budgets to improve these standards. Submitter 6 raises valid concerns regarding funding for the Yakandenda pump track. Council has committed $300,000 towards both the Tangam and Waganya pump tracks in recent years, yet Yakandenda has not received an equivalent outcome. I will continue to work with the Yakandenda Sports Park Committee and Yak Tracks to better understand the remaining funding shortfall and, if appropriate, advocate for its consideration as part of the mid-year budget review. Finally, I'd like to also support the upgrade of the Allens Flat Tennis Club toilet facilities. I think that was submission 7 or 8. As we've identified this project already in the public toilet strategy, and that really just relies on funding opportunities becoming available for the upgrade of those public toilets. But it's definitely on the list and something that we're looking at. So at this stage, I'm happy with the recommendation to proceed with the budget unchanged. However, I'll be paying close attention to potential revisions at mid-year should any of the current projects be delayed and funds become available in the 26-27 financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. I'd also like to thank the 10 community members who took the time to submit what I thought was some really thoughtful and quality perspectives on key projects, as well as the general matter of Council's financial sustainability. And on some of those projects that came up some were already on our radar, as mentioned, like Allen's Flat Toilets, for example, in the toilet strategy. But some of them are also a little bit left field too, which I think is great. You know, we want to be from time to time taken out of our comfort zone by communities, seeing things through a community set of eyes, not through, say, the set of eyes that I might see as a councillor. And with some of these, I feel that there's a number of, what I did notice, I often don't look too much at what towns the responses come from. But I did notice that if we include Allen's Flat with Yakandanda, 7 of the 10 responses were from that particular community. So it's probably no great surprise. They're a very community that is quite empowered and have high expectations of council, and yeah, there were some great submissions. Really, all 10 were great submissions, and I think that was a point I wanted to make. Also, I wanted to say that even though there are no changes made to the budget as a result of the submissions, some of the suggestions are already in place, or some addressed even further on under other items in this particular meeting agenda. So, yeah, and the Allen's Flat toilet one, it is a little bit difficult because we do have find it very difficult to get funding to upgrade facilities that are on state government-owned reserves, and that's. But I guess the fact that we've got them in a strategy, we can just look out for opportunities to upgrade some of those facilities that really are well below a standard that we would consider reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Horn.
I'd like to point out that one of our greatest strengths, and indeed I think one of our most important duties as the level of government closest to the people, is championing the priorities of our communities and ensure that their voices are heard. What is important is whether the budget before us reflects the consistent messaging we have received. A few years ago, Council introduced pre-budget surveys and strongly supported that initiative. In the first year, we received 311 responses. In the second year, it was 313. And those responses demonstrated that our community wanted to help shape the Council's priorities. The following year, participation dropped to double-digit responses. I can't say with certainty why that happened, but I did have community members tell me they didn't participate because they couldn't see where their earlier input had made a difference. Whether that's the whole explanation or not, it should give us a pause. What has impressed me most, however, over the past 5 years in particular, isn't simply the number of responses, it's how remarkably consistent the priorities have been. Roads, drainage, footpaths, emergency resilience, value for money, and value for money. Our community has done its part by consistently telling us what matters most. I believe they also deserve to see how those priorities have been considered and reflected in the recommendations before us today. For me, consultation isn't just about asking people what they think, it's about closing the loop. That is the standard I'll be applying when we consider the adoption of the budget in the next item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is adoption of the 2026-27 budget. The recommendation goes over 2.5 pages. I'll read some of it. Council, having given public notice and having received and considered submission, adopts the attached 2026-27 budget, including the budgeted financial statements as defined by the Local Government Finance and Reporting Regulations 2014. The fees and charges for 2026-27 as listed in the attached 2026-27 budget be effective from the 1st of July 2026. 3, that the Chief Executive Officer or delegate gives public notice of this decision to adopt the following: A, the 2026-27 budget, B, the 2026-27 10-year financial plan, and C, the 2026-27 revenue and rating plan. It then goes on to item 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, where it lists the average rate increase, general rates, municipal charge, waste management charges, payment options, and borrowings, and a whole raft of detail in there that I won't read to the meeting. Do I have a councillor to move that motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. It's been a long journey, which we spoke about last month, really, when we put it out for draft. I'm pretty confident we've sent it out to the community and completed that consultation process. And I'd really like to thank the community members who took the time to make the submissions, because that feedback is an important part of the whole process. Of course, right from the very beginning, community have had access into this process, as have councillors and staff. It helps ensure transparency and accountability in our decision making. This budget remains consistent with what we set out in the draft. It maintains core services, reflects the priorities that our community has clearly identified, particularly roads, resilience, and maintaining existing assets. And it does so within a constrained financial environment. We're still operating under rate capping with increasing costs and ongoing financial pressures. The budget is a measured and responsible response to that reality. Having said that, we've had a lot of discussion in this chamber over this last 4 or 5 months, really, about a number of things. And I was just really had some questions to our Greg Pinkerton, the Director of Planning and Corporate Services, around a couple of those things that have been sticking points for me. So one of them is that we normally have a $5 million cash reserve that we feel confident going forward yearly with that there to sustain us. This year we haven't. I'm just wondering if he could speak to us about that, the fact that we've dropped that $5 million down to 3.65.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. So each year management prepares a budget that then goes through the councillor review process. And when we do that, we always present a budget that balances. So we have a number of different variables that we can adjust. So we can look at capital works, we can look at operating expenses, income, and various things like that. You're absolutely right. The $5 million cash reserve, we don't usually need to touch. That's been quite stable for quite a number of years. This year, there's some financial sustainability pressures across the sector. So all councils are starting to look at financial sustainability. And when we looked at next year, we needed to have a very lean budget. And there's a couple of graphs and a bit of information in the report that shows that Indigo Shire is the leanest of all of the small rural councils. So we needed a lean budget, but there's not too much left to cut. So one of the variables that we adjusted was a reduction in that cash balance. We were comfortable to propose that to councillors and tonight to council, mainly for 2 reasons. Indigo Shire has a higher than average rates debt, and we'll be doing some work to recover that rates debt over the next year, and so some of that money will be coming in. We also have a reasonably high bank balance, because what you're talking about with the 5 mil is an underlying cash balance, not what happens to be in the bank at any particular time. And at the moment, the cash balance is a bit higher than that, and we actually by now we would have received a prepayment of the financial assistance grant. So we're quite comfortable that the cash balance is quite okay, and we don't expect to be going close to that 5 mil for a long time yet.
Thank you. And you did raise the $3.56 million that's owed to us in terms of a rates debt. So I see we're going to try and get back 10% this year. I just wanted to know if you could explain where you got the 10%. I mean, from my perspective, I know that probably a lot of the community would be pretty annoyed to think that we're looking at a tight budget when we have that amount of money owed to us. So if you could just explain that strategy or that process.
Yeah, certainly through the Mayor. The philosophy behind this was not actually based on a 10%. There's some very good data on rates debt throughout Victoria and lots of very good benchmarking. Indigo Shire is one of the higher rates debt councils in Victoria, and the workings behind the 350 is that we believe that it's entirely reasonable and doable to reduce our rates debt by $1 million over 3 years. So that's about 330 per year. There's a number of components to this. We've been prevented by the state government from pursuing rates debt in court. When I say we, all of Victorian councils, and there are some large debts that are owed in Indigo Shire that we believe should be fairly easy to pursue. And so when we're looking at $1 million over 3 years, we've rounded that up to 350 for the first year as what we believe is an appropriate target.
Thank you. I just think it's important that we reflect that discussion we've really been having ourselves within the chamber. There's been a lot of things we've had to talk about with such a tight budget. And over the last 5 years, really, this budget process has shown me that along with the rest of the councils throughout Victoria, we have to address this long-term financial sustainability. And we need a strategy to work with the financial constraints of rate capping, rising construction costs, higher insurance, bushfire, flooding and extreme weather events, maintaining aged roads, swimming pools and assets, while providing what the community expect of us, of the same level of service to our community. And it's very tight. So this is happening across the whole of Victoria. I'm really supportive of the budget as presented, but I'm very aware that our outlook is not sustainable for the future, and we need to address this through tighter financial management and strategy. And of course, that's what we'll be doing. But I think this budget absolutely reflects that the tight considerations and the fact that we have to look, something has to change.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I support the adoption of the 26-27 budget. This budget has been prepared during a really difficult period for local government, with rising construction costs, rising fuel prices, infrastructure renewal pressures and increasing compliance obligations. And I suppose most importantly, the budget report openly acknowledges those pressures, and it notes that while the state government rate cap is set at that 2.75%, inflation was running above 4% when this budget was prepared, and continues at that rate. And this is well above the Reserve Bank's target range of 2 to 3%. And councils don't mainly buy household consumer goods, which is the normal measure of inflation. We buy other stuff. We buy bitumen for roads, drainage works, bridges and construction services, and most of that has risen much faster than CPI in recent years. So I think it's important that the community understands the issue around the inflation effect on council income, and therefore what that does to the overall budget. And also I think it's important, therefore, to explain that the 2.75 rate cap is only an average across the right across the municipality, and item 6.3 clearly shows the different rates that are applied depending on how each person's property valuation has changed. Well, the rates will change with the different valuation that's changed relative to the rest of the Shire. But despite these pressures, the budget still maintains current core services and delivers a substantial capital works program. Importantly, the budget includes a 13 million capital works program, and that includes 4.6 million of carried forward projects from last year. It's also important to highlight that in that capital works program, there's 3.3 million towards road maintenance and upgrades. So that's 25% of the total capital works program. Now that recognises that roads remain council's largest recurring investment. And as we all know, our email inboxes are full of the community's feedback showing that this is their highest priorities. So we as a council, I think, understand that. There are also community infrastructure projects which are really good to see across the Shire. Barclay Park Pavilion Works, Chiltern Rec Reserve lighting, Tangam tennis court upgrades, Kiwa cricket net and irrigation improvements. So we can still, even though we're in a very tight financial environment, we can still support the community and support infrastructure improvements. I will say that there are items within this budget that I just don't support. There are projects and spending that, in my view, have again been deferred too long. And there is some spending that I personally would not prioritise at all for council funding. However, a council budget isn't what I want. A council budget is always a compromise. It's always delivered, or it's arrived at with competing priorities and views. On balance, I believe this budget responsibly maintains services, continues investment in essential infrastructure, and recognises the difficult financial environment facing both council and our community. So I commend the officers for their great work in preparing this budget, and it's been tough. We've all been through quite a journey on this. And I also encourage the officers to pursue those that owe outstanding rates, as we've just talked about. So I think that needs some very strong focus. But I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
Before I continue, I'd like to thank our officers for responding so positively to my request to bring together the results of our pre-budget surveys. Seeing those results side by side has highlighted the remarkably consistent messaging from our community, and I sincerely appreciate the work that went into preparing that summary. Having carefully considered the budget as a whole and tested it against the top 10 priorities identified through that consistent community messaging, it's clear there is significant investment in roads, bridges, drainage, and footpaths, and I genuinely welcome that. However, my duty tonight isn't simply to look at the individual investments. Is to consider whether the overall budget reflects the balance our community has consistently told us it wants to see. Every dollar in this budget belongs to our community, whether it comes from rates, taxes, or government grants. It's public money entrusted to us. Our duty is to use it wisely and purposefully to deliver the greatest benefit to the broadest cross-section of our community. So does it pass the pub test? Could I sit beside a ratepayer and honestly explain why we've chosen to spend their money this way? Could I explain why this budget achieves the right balance across our sectors, our demographics, and between the things we need and the things we'd like to have? In my judgment, this budget doesn't quite achieve that balance. Experience has taught me that every significant investment should demonstrate a clear community benefit, sound reasoning, and evidence that we learned from previous decisions so we make better decisions going forward. After carefully considering the budget, I can't honestly say this is the balanced community-facing budget I was hoping to support. This isn't a vote against the work that's gone into preparing the budget. It's simply an acknowledgement that I couldn't, in good conscience, vote yes. One of my duties as a councillor is not only to explain how I vote, but why I vote that way. I hope tonight I've done that honestly, respectfully, and faithfully to the people who've elected me. For those reasons, I won't be supporting the adoption of the 2026-27 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. I would like to make some comments on the budget as well. I think you can hear from, in particular, Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Burke's comments that I'd echo. It's a very tight budget, and that is certainly a sentiment that's echoed right across Australia. We've just returned from the Australian Local Government Association conference, where local governments from the 538 right across Australia come together, and they moved an emergency motion about financial sustainability of local governments and the need to return to 1% of Commonwealth taxation revenue to ensure the ongoing financial sustainability of councils. That's what we look at a federal level, and they are continuing to deny that request and say that they don't like giving untied funding to councils. At the state level, we're rate capped. So this is the environment that we're working within, and we will continue to make our case for the fact that it really is local governments that deliver services into regions and rural areas like we do. The federal government tries to do that, the state government tries to do that, but it really is local governments that are the ones empowering the communities and making sure that as the government closest to the people, that we're helping to achieve whatever their outcomes are. I would agree with Councillor Burke. On balance, I think there's things I would strike out if it was my budget, similar to Councillor Burke, and there's other things that I would fund more generously, but I understand that this environment is an environment of consensus, and so on balance, I'm very happy to support what we've had put in front of us tonight. I look forward to continuing the discussion with the community about the long-term financial sustainability of councils like Indigo, because we need to know what you think of our spending and your involvement in those discussions going forward. But on balance, I would say it's been a good process. I'm always looking at how we can improve it year on year, and we will have lots of feedback to that effect. But I'm very happy to endorse this budget tonight. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. At the May meeting, I spoke on my three fundamental issues with this budget. Borrowings, $3 million of new borrowings over 3 years to fund usual capital works. Accountability, approximately 15 million planned capital works, including carry forwards, when we'll deliver approximately 7.5 million in 25-26. Now, I'll just note there's a slight discrepancy with Councillor Burke saying 13 million. I think one of us is talking Indigo Shire assets, and one of us is talking both Indigo Shire and other, so places like Barclay Park that are state-owned. So that's the discrepancy there. Transparency, lack of clear linkages between strategic documents informing investment decisions. I won't touch on those again, but I support and reinforce my previous statements. Many local governments in Australia are financially unsustainable, and quite a few of us have mentioned that tonight. This is particularly true for regional and rural councils in Victoria, where costs continue to rise, revenue opportunities remain limited, and rate capping has not kept pace with inflation. in a post-COVID environment, which many have spoken on tonight. For every $100 collected in taxes and levies across Australia, around $3 is directed to local government. Yet councils continue to deliver an expanding range of frontline services and infrastructure, from local roads and waste collection to sporting facilities, community halls, libraries and public spaces, and many other things that people have talked about, like pools and all sorts of things. Currently, our expenditure is higher than our revenue, and every Indigo household knows that's not sustainable. All this while our debtors continue to increase and our cash on hand dwindles. Borrowing does have an important place in local government, particularly for major intergenerational infrastructure. However, it should not become the default response to maintaining our usual capital renewal program. The Local Government Act 2020 requires council to give effect to governance principles that include making decisions based on the best available evidence, ensuring transparency, maintaining the ongoing financial viability of council, and considering the economic, social and environmental sustainability of our decisions. These are not aspirational concepts. They should underpin every budget we adopt. When we approve capital programs that consistently exceed our delivery capacity, rely increasingly on borrowings to maintain routine investment, or fail to clearly demonstrate how spending aligns with our strategic priorities, I believe we risk falling short of the intent of those principles. Our responsibility is not only to adopt a budget, but to adopt one that is realistic, deliverable and financially sustainable. And therefore I won't support tonight's budget.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Thank you. I'm satisfied that this budget has been through a very thorough process, both internally initially and through the period when it's been on public display and comment. And I think we all acknowledge that there's considerable pressures at this point in time and probably in the foreseeable future on local governments to be able to meet the expectations of the community. I do have a couple of questions actually for Director of Planning and Corporate Services. You were talking before about rates debt, and one point we didn't address in that conversation was that rates debt is inevitably settled when properties are sold. Can you just confirm that and how that works, please?
Yes, thank you. Through the Mayor. That is true. Rates debt is a debt on property, not a debt on a person. And so it's a fairly patient debt. It will stay there, and at whatever point the property changes hands or is settled, council is one of the first debtors to be paid. So it does sit there. There is an affordability issue with that, though. There's a penalty interest rate that is set by the Victorian State Government, which sits at 10%. So one of the, there's obviously some cash flow issues that come up when council has a large rates debt. But there's another angle to this, which is that people who are in that rates debt, it compounds quite quickly with a 10% rates debt. So even though it might sit there and be settled when the property is sold, we are a bit concerned about the amount that it grows by.
Thank you. I have another question. Again, the Director of Planning and Corporate Services. This one is just about, I notice in the documentation that there are, in the breakdown of the Capital Works program, and talk about some community projects, and two of them I believe weren't successful in being funded through the Tiny Towns grant. So one was the upgrade of the old Chiltern Library, and the other was Rutherglen Maternal Health upgrade. So what occurs in those situations where we've got funds allocated? How do we, all up there's $120,000 set aside. So can you just explain the process there?
Yes, absolutely. Through you, Madam Mayor. One of the challenges with the budget is whenever you put something on a piece of paper, it changes. Every day we're finding out more information. And so there are always things in the budget that are contingent, and in the capital workspace they're marked with a yellow highlight. We will only put something in where we have a fairly large likelihood of receiving that funding. So more often than not, we do get it. When something like that changes, it's the same as how we deal with, let's just say, a capital works project where we might have an estimate and it comes in under budget, and we end up with a saving there. We handle that in the same way. So we will monitor that, we report it monthly, and then at Q1 and particularly at Q2, we have an opportunity to just reforecast what that looks like for the year. And then there's some obvious options there. We can either take that as a budget saving, or depending on how the rest of the capital works program is going, sometimes that balances the capital works. And then obviously, as well as the projects that don't come to fruition, there's sometimes other projects that we'd like to fund. So sometimes that funding can be transferred. But the philosophy or the rules that we live by is that once a budget is adopted, if one of those changes needs to be made, it will come back to a council resolution. We do that Q1, Q2.
Okay, thanks very much.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
Yes, so what we're hearing over and over is it's very tight circumstances, not only in Indigo Shire, but across Victoria, and as you reflect from last week, across the whole of Australia. So the fact that we want 1% of the federal taxation to where it will be spent more effectively. We all know that councils are at the cliff face. Where we spend that 1%, the federal government will be spending that on a strategy or something. Like we can get straight down and spend it with the community. So 1%, and we also, from the state government, we're in a rate capped environment, so we don't ever, well, sometimes we do, but often we aren't even at CPI. So we're going backwards very quickly. So that's really obviously what's happening at the moment. But in terms of the budget, we have been very involved. We've got staff members, so thank you, Greg Pinkerton, the director, and Phil Garoni, manager, who bend over backwards for the last 5 months to continually say, what else do you want to know? What else do you want to pick apart? What else can we do to make this work? This is your budget, they keep saying. And I mean, some of us say, it's not our budget, it's your budget. But it is, it's our budget, and the community have been very much involved right from the word go in this budget as well. Some people don't agree with the end result, which is that's their prerogative, but we've all had a real opportunity to give a lot of feedback, to try and wrangle things, to change things. And of course, going forward, we're going to have to do more with that process. I'd just like to say it was more than a 2 Kit Kat budget. And I'll just leave it at that. But thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those in favour is Councillor Burke, Harvey, Price, Shepherd, Landells. Those against, Councillor Horn and Councillor Dowsley. The motion's carried. Item 11.4 is the Finance Report, May 2026. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council accepts the May 2026 Finance Report. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor. Councillor, can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor Price. Look, I don't have a lot to say on the finance report for May 2026. I accept that this report is a true representation of the current financial results. There's also an item, I think it's 13.1, which is the capital works report. So there's sort of a mix here where some of it's mentioned in this item and some's mentioned in 13.1. So I'm going to reserve the majority of my commentary on capital works for item 13.1. But I am supportive of this financial report for May being a true reflection.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, thanks.
Any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is the draft Indigo Shire settlement strategy. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the draft Indigo Shire settlement strategy, 2 places the draft Indigo Shire settlement strategy on public exhibition for a period of 6 weeks from the 1st of July 2026 to the 14th of August 2026, inviting submissions in accordance with Council's community engagement policy, and 3, notes that the Indigo Shire settlement strategy will be brought to a future council meeting for adoption. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd?
So here is another one of our strategic planning documents that we have been waiting for a long time. It's quite exciting to have it before us because it sets out a long-term plan for how our towns will grow and change over the next 25 years to 2051. And its goal is to make sure that Indigo Shire is well planned, sustainable, respectful of what people love about their towns. It's about population changes that we need to plan ahead for, housing, infrastructure, road service, community facilities, environment risks like bushfire and flooding, and it provides a clear framework so growth happens in the right places at the right scale and in the right way. Not all towns will grow in the same way. The strategy identifies 3 approaches. So there's growth towns, got Rutherglen, Waganya, Kiewit, Tangam. These areas will accommodate most future growth. Infill towns, Beechworth and Yakandanda, growth will happen within existing areas, carefully protecting heritage and character. And constrained towns, Barnawartha, Chiltern, growth will be limited and gradual due to environmental and servicing constraints. So a key focus of the strategy is protecting the identity and feel of each town, and that includes township character and neighbourhood character. So both guiding how each town develops and looks overall, and what new development looks like at a local level. And this has to really fit in with existing communities. And we don't want to erode what makes each place unique. So that's why it's going out for community consultation now. We've had a fair bit we've looked at it closely. Staff have looked at it, councillors have looked at it. It's now communities' turn to look at especially helping to define neighbourhood character. So in other words, what you really see is special about your town and your area, what should be protected, what change is acceptable, and how your town evolves over time. What happens next? The draft strategy will be on public exhibition for 6 weeks. You can review it and provide feedback, and we will consider your submissions and refine the strategy, and a final version will come back to council for adoption. And it really is important that community give their feedback, because this document, once it's passed and once it goes into our planning regulations, will be what we look at when we say whether a development or whether a road or whether a business, whatever, should go in that spot. And it will all be as planned, rather than at the moment each time we have to really say, well, what is the neighbourhood character of that space when we're looking at a development? What are the community concerned about in that space? And then we have a whole lot of community people telling us, this is your opportunity once and for all to get down what you see as important, what you don't want, what you would like us to consider when we're doing any infrastructure or development. But I just like to really thank also the staff who've done a power of work in this space. It's a big document, and there's been a lot of time and energy put into it, and it's really exciting to have it put before us.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Mayor Price. I too would like to commend our officers because of all the sessions we had and all the maps and all the patience of our planning officers when the councillors asked many, many questions. Also, I think the public's going to have to be aware the public exhibition why certain towns and certain places can't be developed like they like. That there are limitations put on not only by the council, but by the CFA and by Northeast Water. Sometimes it's out of the council's hands that you can't build a house there, or there might be a bushfire, so you're not allowed to do that, or there isn't enough water. So I think the public should have a good look at it, but also understand that a lot of work has gone into it. And there are reasons for almost everything there. And I'm sure the officers will be happy to answer their questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I just really want to reiterate that the importance of this document. So recently we attended a workshop with Towong and Alpine Shire at Tallangatta, presented by a solicitor that works in the planning space. And we talked at length about the state government's priorities when it comes to housing growth and housing targets that have been dictated out to our local government areas. And we really talked about what instruments local governments have to influence development in their shires. And this is one of those instruments, and it's a very important one. So I want to really stress to the community that if you're interested in this space, this is a document that you need to read, because this document will end up in our planning scheme, and it will end up being one of the only few documents that we can rely on to influence outcomes in our shire. That's all, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Horn.
Every one of our townships has its own character, strengths and challenges, and the people who live there understand those better than anyone. That's why I particularly welcome the emphasis on capturing local knowledge and lived experience. If we genuinely listen to our communities, we'll make better planning decisions and preserve the very qualities that make people choose to live here in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Thank you. I think that this draft settlement strategy is a very exciting and a very important plan for Indigo Shire. As other councillors have pointed out, along with work that our planning department have recently done in with ESD principles and settlement strategy and things like this, we're able to have the instruments, I think was a word that Councillor Dowsley used, to influence planning outcomes in the future, which will give communities more control over how their communities look into the future and being able to give their support for planning, I suppose, and how their neighbourhood character is preserved, etc. This strategy will be out for a 6-week comment period, which is a little bit longer than a lot of our other strategies, but I think that's perhaps reflected in the fact that it's a big document, there's quite a bit of complexity, but it's also it's a high priority document, I think, for a lot of reasons that we've all commented on. I would like to just say that Indigo Shire is made up of a lot of hamlets and towns, and some of them are bigger than others, and villages and that kind of thing. And to the uninitiated, people may not see that Stanley is any different to any of the other towns, but I just want to make the point that Stanley actually isn't included in this document because it's the only township in Indigo Shire that's entirely within the farming zone. And because of this, there's also bushfire risk profile and strong agriculture influence. So Stanley Township is being addressed separately outside of the settlement strategy. But a similar project is taking place with that community to recognise their individual opportunities and challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to say, Councillor Dowsley, you covered a lot of what I was going to say about that session that we did in Tallangatta with our neighbouring councils, both small rural councils, Towong and Alpine. We talked a lot on that day about the fact that the state planning minister really has godlike powers. They're not our words. Those are the words used to describe the authority that the planning act has in it, and the fact that we've probably seen it underutilized over the last little while, but in history, but in recent times, we are really seeing the full authority of that role and those godlike powers really be asserted, because there's a housing crisis, or because local governments are seen to sometimes get in the way in planning all of these different situations that we're in. But the real clarity that I walked away with from that day, which again, Councillor Dowsley, you've mentioned, is the role that we have in making sure that we have really solid strategic planning documents. That's a really important part of the role for councillors and for councils, is to have that suite of documents really clear. So I would echo lots of what the other councillors have said. If there's one thing you engage with us on, make it this, because this is so important for us to get this right. While we hold on to our small sphere of influence in planning, we can provide real clarity around what Indigo Shire Council should look like, what it does look like, what it should look like, and what's really important to us. So this is a really important document to that end. If no other councillor would like to speak to the motion, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd, if you'd like to sum up.
Yes. I'd just like to say, following on from everybody's talking about how important these strategic documents are, the other thing about strategic documents from my point of view is once they're embedded, there's less that we have to do as community and councillors, because we have said what we would like to see happen, and it means we can step back a little bit and have great process that should be transparent and should be available for all to witness and be proud of. So I'm just hoping that with this suite of strategic documents will make a real difference to how we can move forward effectively. And I'd just like to thank, if we could, Grace Perry, our strategic planner, and Josh Billette and the planning team, and also you, Greg Pinkerton, as the head of Director of Planning and Corporate Services. I think we're really moving through these strategic documents. It feels like it's taken a long time, but I think we're slowly getting to the pointy end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12 is Community and Economic Development, and item 12.1 is the Indigo Destination Management Plan 2036. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 considers the outcomes of the public exhibition process, feedback received and changes made to the draft Indigo Destination Management Plan 2036, and 2 adopts the Indigo Destination Management Plan 2036 DMP36. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you. Look, I said when this was going out for public exhibition that I felt like it was a really ambitious and innovative plan, and I still share those views. I think this is a great piece of work, and it's really future focused, which I find really exciting. There's a lot of community feedback on this plan, and the staff have done a fantastic job in providing feedback on all of those comments in the attachments, which I think is a wonderful job as well, and obviously took quite a lot of time. I just wanted to pull out a couple of those specific feedback items because they're quite topical around things we've been discussing lately. One of those was to develop a tourism advisory group, and this fits in actually really nicely with the current review that's going on of all of our community committees, because we've had discussions about whether it's time to review what topics that they're on, the frequency of meeting, whether they should be more closely aligned to the current council plan, or whether they should be focused on a single strategy, for example. So that's a review that we're currently going through. So I think that feedback there can very much be considered as part of that review. So thank you to that person that provided that. There was also a comment in there about truck traffic, and it just made me reflect on a session that we did at last week in Canberra, and that was around some technology whereby truck movements can be now tracked at the truck level on all state roads. And I haven't had a chance yet to speak with Director of Infrastructure about how we're utilising data, but I see that as quite exciting. If we can, I mean, I know even in Yakandanda, there's concerns about trucks going over Stone Bridge. I know it's an issue in Rutherglen. I'm sure there's other issues in Barney and other places as well. So I think if we're not utilising that data, there's some great tools available out there now where we can access this data and advocate for our communities with real-time evidence, which is really exciting. So I'm keen to explore that further. Another comment in there was around activating of underutilised commercial spaces, and this has recently come up through some feedback I received separately from a community member around vacant shop fronts and how we can activate those. And I reflect on some shop fronts I saw in Mansfield recently that had, for example, art exhibitions in vacant shop fronts. I'm not really sure that that's a council responsibility. It probably fits nicely with chambers or tourism groups in a local towns, but I think there's some great innovative opportunities that we can certainly look at with our economic development team and liaising with local groups on those sorts of things. There was a common theme that came through in a lot of the feedback around achievability and funding sources. So there was a lot of ideas in this plan and a lot of commentary about, well, how are we going to fund that? How are we going to build that tourism attraction? How are we going to deliver on those aspirations? And I spoke about this earlier, talking about another strategy, in that I really think that's our role to be aspirational. We never know what funding sources will be available to us from state and federal. And it is true that they seem to be decreasing in the current state and federal financial state that we're in. But they do come up and somebody has to win them. And if you don't have these ambitious strategic plans, then you've got no hope. So that's the purpose of these documents, is that when these grant opportunities come up, we can say, here you go, we have well thought through strategic projects ready to go. So I think that there is certainly a role for those ambitions in these documents. Otherwise, just like to thank the staff on a great piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, I'd like to highlight that some of the feedback, I guess, that community had input into the plan during the comment period, and I guess some of that feedback was concerns over the strategic aspect of the document and that it wasn't specific enough in terms of action plans. And I want to make the point that in this revised plan, so the final plan's coming to us as opposed to the draft, a section which is termed delivery process has been added to page 10. So previously there was a timeline right up the back of the document about delivery. That's still there on about page 46 or something, but an extra piece of has been put on page 10, which is up towards the front of the document and outlines the fact that there are three-year action plans that will be part of this particular strategic document. So one of them is covering the period 2027 to 2029, and that's being worked on right now. So for anyone who is a bit concerned about that aspect of the strategy or the plan, I guess, so more detailed action plans are coming to accompany it. Also about the regenerative focus of the plan. I think it's you probably don't have to read too many news items on overseas countries, particularly in Europe and also Japan and places like this. Over-tourism is a big concern, and down the Mediterranean, areas like that. So other parts of the world are really dealing with quite a significant issue where tourism is fine up to a point, but then you can hit that point of diminishing return where there's actually the places that people are wanting to visit become unlivable for the locals, and rents skyrocket and make that livability very difficult. So it's great to see that this particular plan has acknowledged that that is an issue and is looking to do something that I guess is more ethical in the area of tourism. And yeah, that's all my points to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Yeah, I think it's from the feedback, the direction of this plan seems to be strongly supported by the community. It seems to be a mandate for sustainable tourism, protecting Indigo and what makes it special, and ensuring that tourism gives back, not takes away. The green gold rush concept captures that shift well, moving from extraction to regeneration. And what I particularly support is the emphasis on balance, balancing visitation with residential amenity, balancing economic growth with environmental protection, and focusing on optimal tourism, not just more tourism. And that reflects what we've been hearing from our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. If not, I will return to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up? CEO, can I just confirm, it appears that we've lost Councillor Burke, whether he's dropped off or not. Do we just need to note that for the meeting and continue on?
Yep, so we'll keep in touch with him offline to see if he needs help getting back in.
Yep.
But for the time he's not visible on screen, he'll be deemed not to be present at the meeting.
Yep.
So that'll be recorded in the notes.
Thank you, CEO. Okay, councillors, I'll put it to the vote. He's
Sorry,
just returned.
Back down, yep.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.2 is the Indigo Shire Council Library Strategy 2026 to 2030. The recommendation is that Council 1 considers the outcomes of the public exhibition process, feedback received and changes made to the Indigo Shire Council Library Strategy 2026 to 2030, and 2, adopts the Indigo Shire Council Library Strategy 2026 to 2030. Do I have somebody to move that? Sorry, CEO. Yes.
City Mayor Price, just to advise councillors and the community that after this strategy attachment went onto the website, we found a small formatting error on page 48 and 49. The tables there had a slight formatting error, so we've circulated to councillors today via email an updated, adjusted version. And if I could just table that same document here tonight, so when councillors are considering this item, they're considering the adjusted version, please. Thank you.
So CEO, just to confirm, no content changes, formatting changes only?
No content changes, just the formatting of the tables on pages 48 and 49.
Thank you. Councillors, do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd?
The Indigo Shire Library Strategy 2026-2030 sets out a clear direction for how we would deliver and strengthen library services across the Shire over the next 4 years. It's about making sure our libraries continue to meet the changing needs of our community, so supporting learning, connection and wellbeing while improving access, particularly in our smaller and more remote communities, and guiding future investment in facilities, programs and services in line with council priorities. So the strategy was put out for public exhibition. We received feedback from a broad cross-section of the community through 136 online survey responses, 3 written submissions and 26 drop-in participants. This input included both structured data and qualitative feedback, along with strong expressions of support for library services. So I got the impression that a lot of the feedback was to come and thank them for the great work that they're doing. But some things that were highlighted, priorities such as improved spaces, stronger outreach, expanded collections, youth engagement and equitable access. This feedback was directly used to refine the strategy, resulting in the following key changes. So again, you give feedback, we try and embed that feedback into our strategies. So equity of access has been strengthened, expanding and earlier outreach, expanding more flexible library spaces, for example, introducing bookable meeting rooms and quiet study areas, stronger youth focus, a commitment to expanding team programs and involving young people in planning, community co-design embedded. So the library programs will be based on survey feedback and community input, enhanced collections and accessibility, after-hours service and self-service access, clearer infrastructure planning and stronger governance and accountability. So that's quite a bit of input from the community, and that's quite a lot of strengthening, I think, of that strategy. Just like to also thank Penelope McGuffick and anyone that was working, her team, on this is a lot of work, and often it goes out to a consultant, but this is basically being done by our staff, and I think they've done a great job.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I'm pleased to support the adoption of this library strategy. What stands out to me in this is clearly it's a better document because of the consultation process. The report openly demonstrates how community feedback directly changed and strengthened the strategy. Importantly for the communities in the Lower Kiewa Valley, the consultation highlighted a very strong public input from the Kiewa and Tangam and other residents in the area. The report notes that Tangam Balanga generated the strongest and most urgent community feedback, with many residents identifying the lack of a library service as a significant equity gap. As a result of this strong feedback, the Kiewa Tangam Community Hub has now been elevated from simply a business case proposal to an urgent equity priority within the final strategy. But this strategy is more broader than one community. It also reflects strong feedback and planning for Beechworth, Rutherglen, Chiltern and Yak, including improved spaces, outreach services, youth programs, flexible spaces, and stronger collection development across the entire Shire. I particularly welcome the stronger outreach commitment for rural communities, the focus on accessibility and inclusion, and the fact that the final strategy now contains clearer governance, performance measures, and accountability. The consultation process itself was extensive, with 136 survey responses, written submissions, and community drop-in sessions. And the overall feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and that just shows how important a strong library program is for our communities. To me, this is a very good example of community engagement working properly. The community spoke, councillors listened, and the final strong strategy is stronger because of it. So I commend the officers, the library staff, who put in an enormous amount of work for this, and the presentations we had showed this, and to also the community members who contributed. So therefore, I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'll just echo the comments that have been made and say that there was a couple of really interesting bits of community feedback that haven't been raised that I'm really keen for us to understand and work more with the community on, in particular the idea of flexible spaces within the library, the fact that bookable meeting or collaboration rooms and quiet study or work in dedicated spaces were the two most frequently selected options in Q4 across all respondents. It's a new service commitment as a result of asking that question, and I think it's really interesting in terms of when we see co-working spaces and we see the evolving role that we expected our libraries to play. I know certainly for myself, in the last month I've used libraries in 4 different local government areas, all for that exact reason, looking for a quiet space to work in between meetings in other areas. And I see the real value that libraries could play in that space. So I think we would be really well placed to be able to accommodate something like that as part of our service. And I continually look at the Chiltern Community Hub and the library there and think what an incredible service our libraries can be. They're multi-purpose to the extreme in a building like that. And so I just welcome all of the feedback and our openness to receiving it, and immediately looking to pivot to what the service is that the community is asking us to provide, not just the service that we traditionally offer. So I can see that all that feedback is very well considered by our staff and it immediately being enacted. And so I look forward to seeing what the ongoing offering at our libraries looks like. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to add a couple of points that having frequented the Shire libraries over a 20-year period, there's been considerable development of most of the spaces. I can think Beechworth, Yackandandah and Chiltern being the three obvious ones. And libraries are really grown a lot in that period, or changed, I should say, just continue to evolve. They're really quite dynamic spaces. They tend to be spaces that embrace technology and can often be attractive to the community for that reason. And your point, Mayor Price, about having more flexible spaces within them, I think was a point that came through in the feedback, and that staff have incorporated that into the strategy. Also, the two biggest towns for growth within Indigo Shire are Rutherglen and Kiwa Tangam, and it's great to see that the Kiwa Tangam town, that's a town that doesn't have a library at the moment, but a strong support for a community hub / library of some description be pursued for that community. I think that's really important because it definitely would be a greatly enhanced community there. I think as I continue to grow and become a little more self-sufficient, they shouldn't, for example, just be seen as a satellite to, say, Wodonga, for example. Rutherglen, it's really quite interesting looking at some of the feedback that, I think we look like we're going to have a lot of population growth in Rutherglen, which is just going to build a stronger and stronger case for doing something with the library there, and I noticed that a lot of the feedback was sort of split between whether we look at a new library on a greenfield site or we do upgrades to the existing facility. And that'll obviously be a conversation that is ongoing with the community. But it just probably underlies the point that, these are dynamic spaces, and it's great to have a strategy so that we can, make the most of future opportunities.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I think the word dynamic is a really great one to use with this strategy. I think obviously it is reflecting what the community are asking for. It's delivering, or being managed well in a dynamic way. And of course, thank you to Councillor Burke for reminding us. Of course, it's delivered by amazing librarians across the Shire who are well loved, and people cry when they leave. So I think it's altogether the libraries are a great service.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.3 is the Indigo Shire Council Annual Grant Program. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 adopts the guidelines and assessment criteria as attached to this report for the following grant streams for 2026-27, A, the Community Grants Program, B, the Events Grants Program, C, Get Active Indigo Grants Program, D, Community Sustainability Grants Program, and 2, delegates to the Chief Executive Officer the appointment of 2 representatives from the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee to the Community Sustainability Grants Program Assessment Panel. To have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd.
So the review of Indigo Shire's grant programs is focused on improving clarity, consistency and alignment with strategic priorities while maintaining existing governance and outcomes. So overall, the findings were that current grant programs are working well following our updates in 23-24. The community feedback highlighted confusion and complexity, not issues with objectiveness or fairness. So that's good to hear. Changes are therefore targeted and practical, and they're not structural. So there's been a number of key improvements, and the community feedback has been incorporated. So it directly responds to concerns about multiple timelines, unclear program differences, and inconsistent information. So the review confirms the grant programs are now fit for purpose, with updates aimed at making them easier to access and understand, strengthening strategic alignment, improving efficiency and consistency. So there's no major policy shifts in it, just practical refinements to improve usability and impact.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder?
Through you, Mayor Price, I have a question to ask. Assessment panel member, Mr. Alan Pleitner, has expressed a concern that a number of the eligibility provisions included in the 2025 community grants guidelines don't appear to be included in the proposed 2026 guidelines. Can our officer please clarify if there have indeed been omissions, and if so, what the rationale is for removing them?
I'll go to Jess Reid, our Manager of Community and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mayor Price. I confirmed with council officers today that the guidelines do actually include each of the eligibility provisions that have been raised as an omission through the community feedback. I will note that this round of grants for 26-27, we have identified the need to provide that greater direction to community members, and we have developed an information pack that supports the guidelines. Now, the information pack only contains a brief snapshot of each of the grant objectives. So within that document, you will not find all the eligibility provisions. So I'd say that the information pack needs to be read alongside the guidelines that do say what is and isn't eligible.
Good, thank you very much. I'd like to add that these grant programs support volunteers, community groups, local events, active lifestyles or environmental projects, and often deliver benefits far beyond the dollars invested. The updated guidelines across the 4 grant streams will hopefully provide greater clarity and consistency for applicants. And I particularly like the fact that these programs encourage communities to become active participants in shaping their own future rather than relying solely on council to do everything. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor Price. At the council meeting in October 2025, I moved a notice of motion instructing the CEO to undertake a review of the Indigo Shire Council's grants program and present finding and recommendations to council prior to the adoption of the 26-27 budget. A review of the program was to provide an opportunity to streamline categories and improve administrative efficiency, ensure our funding aligns with the strategic priorities of the council plan, benchmark Indigo Shire's approach against similar councils to test value for money and fairness, strengthen transparency, governance and community confidence in the process. The motion was endorsed unanimously by council. Councillors have now received an initial briefing on this wider review. However, a report has not been tabled outlining findings and recommendations as noted in the notice of motion. I'd like to ask the CEO a question through you, Mayor. Can the CEO please explain why this report has not been tabled prior to budget adoption as requested in the motion, and to the timeline for delivery of this review?
Thanks for the question, Councillor, through you, Mayor Price. So we have some. We've been working on the review, and partially the review was completed in regards to reviewing the guidelines. The overarching policy is still in progress. Has come back for preliminary look to councillors, but the completion of the project is still going to be subject to a little bit more external consultation, not widespread consultation in a broad sense, but specifically with some of the possibly affected groups. And that'll probably take us another month or two, October. Yeah, so another couple of months where we go back, talk to some of the groups about some of the suggested changes to the overarching policy, and bring that feedback back to a later council meetings. We're aiming for October.
Thank you. So on that basis, I will reluctantly endorse this program with the understanding that councillors will receive the review and recommendations prior to the 27-28 budget and program being adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Andels.
Thank you. I just want to pick up the point that Councillor Dowsley made, and I was trying to remember how it came about. I seem to recall that we did discuss this as councillors to align these 4 grant programs, and well done on your initiative back in October of last year, Councillor Dowsley, because I think whilst I'm familiar with these programs as a community member over many years, I do think what we're seeing put before us here is a much improved program, and because there is, it's a lot clearer for community to understand all the different timelines, and just, I guess, understand that there's, it's just a bit simpler to align those timelines, and be able to offer these grant programs that specialise in 4 distinct areas of community activities. I did want to touch on the Get Active Indigo grants. At the May meeting, we approved a number of projects and allocated $30,000 for the 26-27 financial year, and that's been the normal amount for that particular grant program. Because that one's been running on a different timeline to other grant programs, to bring it into line with the other grant programs, a pro rata amount has been made available of $15,000 as opposed to $30,000. So that's, if people are wondering why that one's bobbed up again and why it's for a different amount, that's the explanation there. And other than that, I would also like to endorse a point made by Councillor Horn, really good point, that this grant program delivers benefit far beyond the actual overall spend, and it really is an investment in community development. And just encourage all community groups to look through the different programs and try and work out how they can fund projects, priority projects.
Thank you, Councillor Andels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I will go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
It's interesting, we were talking earlier about the federal government giving us 1% would be great, because we could use it effectively. And it's a little bit reflected in this space. Here we are giving back some of the community's rates to them to empower them to go out and create amazing events, community infrastructure, get active, some sort of active recreational thing, or sustainability projects. So we know that they are going to deliver a lot of that money, probably, I don't know how many fold, but we know that mostly it's volunteer work, and they're going to do a lot of value adding to their communities with this money. So it's great that we've made it easier for them to access, clearer guidelines, clearer governance. So thank you to the staff for that work.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.4 is the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund 2026 grant applications. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the project recommended in this report to progress to a grant application through the upcoming Local Sports Infrastructure Fund. 2, notes Council's financial contribution to each grant application and includes this in future budgets. And 3, advocates to the state government for the reinstatement of the $1 million grant streams previously offered through the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsley?
Thank you. Very supportive of these two projects that have been outlined in this report. They have come from strategic plans that we have. We have tools that prioritise recreational facility projects against a number of criteria that have been endorsed by council in a matrix, and the projects are then prioritised. Then based on grant opportunities that come up, we go through that list and work out which project best fits or has a best chance of achieving the funding in that grant application. So that's how these projects have come about. Obviously, it's an approval for a grant application, so it doesn't guarantee success, but certainly hope that that we do have some success in these applications.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just make the point that these two projects that are being recommended for a funding application, as Councillor Dowsley pointed out, there is an assessment tool that council staff use, and the community may not know about that, but it's actually, we often can get a little bit competitive town against town, but it should give the community reassurance that projects aren't just randomly picked out, that there is quite a complex assessment tool that the council staff work through in trying to work out, a project in one town as opposed to a different or a similar project in another town. So the Yakandanda cricket nets, if I look at that particular one, so we're looking at putting up 60,000 of our own money. There's also the club's putting up 20,000, and I think the cricket fund of 40,000. But we're through that 120,000, we're looking to leverage 3 times that from state government. So it's not. So I think in that way we're getting good value for money for ratepayers, and also on the recreation strategy, which is the other project, we're seeking $40,000 to go with 15,000 of our own. Now, this strategy would run for 10 years, so that's actually getting a fair bit of value out of that strategy for that amount of spend, and it's very important. Recreation is a huge part of this particular shire, and it's really important that we've got up-to-date strategies that will support future funding applications.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to speak to the third element of the motion, which talks about advocating to the state government for the reinstatement of the $1 million grant stream previously offered through the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund. This is a statewide competitive Victorian government investment program that says that it funds the development of high quality, accessible community sport and active recreation infrastructure. Developing infrastructure that supports individuals and communities who participate less are priorities for the Victorian government. So we've been looking at our advocacy plan this afternoon with a particular lens on it for the state government elections coming up. And interestingly, there's a number of sporting priorities in here that you would think should be able to fit within whatever the maximum stream for this grant is, except that it's $500,000, and each of our asks in terms of facility upgrades around the Shire are 6 times that. So even with the funding available being reinstated up to $1 million, we would still have to go and find more funding to achieve some of these to achieve some of our community's priorities. So that's why we're asking that it's at least reinstated to that level, because I don't know what community facilities can be delivered for $500,000. I don't think such a thing really exists anymore. And so then we have to go looking for federal money for sport infrastructure that should be able to be funded at a statewide level. So I really welcome the inclusion of that third point, particularly as a small rural council. Do any other councillors want to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.5 is contract number 26/7364, provision of swimming pools management services. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes that Indigo, Alpine and Towong Shire councils have chosen to conduct a joint procurement process for the provision of swimming pools management services across all 3 shires, and that a successful contract outcome is conditional on Alpine Shire Council and Towong Shire Council each awarding a contract to the same operator. 2, conditional on similar decisions, by Alpine and Towong Shires, award contract number 26/7364 for provision of swimming pools management services to Belgravia Health and Leisure Group Proprietary Limited, trading as Belgravia Leisure, for a 3-year period commencing the 2026-27 with a 3 1-year extension options at a contract price of $2,378,250, excluding GST, for the operation of Indigo Shire Council's 5 swimming pools, and 3, delegates authority to the CEO to finalise the details and execute the contract documents on its behalf. To have somebody to move that. Moved. Sorry, to have somebody to move that. Moved Councillor Landels, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Landels.
Right. Yeah, so I just want to say on this particular item that I think it's a really good outcome for 3 small rural neighbouring shires to collaborate on this particular contract, which offered ratepayers of each LGA greater value for money, and that's really about all I wanted to say, and also appreciate that it's there's certain logistical matters that had to be worked around to get the 3 councils reasonably aligned with their meeting and decision-making processes to be able to make this announcement at a similar time. But yeah, that's all I'd like to say. I think it's a good outcome. I think we've obviously got some challenges with running pools, which all rural councils really do, given the age of a lot of these pools, probably well past the second, in the latter stages of their life, really, product life cycle. So I guess there are a lot of challenges, and certainly being able to go through a competitive contract procurement process has been beneficial.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I think it's important that the community is aware of what links we have to go to maintain those aging pools and how much money and resources we have to put into it. And this is a good outcome in the scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I'd concur with those comments and just say how great it is that we're able to engage with 2 of our neighbouring councils, 2 small rural shires, to be able to conduct this joint procurement to get a better outcome for all three of us. And just another example of, I think, local government working really well together to make sure that any spend of ratepayers' money is really the best bang for buck that we can get. We know that pools are very expensive, but I think that this is a really good outcome to see the awarding of this swimming pool management services to Belgravia. Any other councillor like to make a comment? Councillor Burke.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, no, I support exactly what you're saying. I think this is an example of where we can be really smart and we can look at efficiencies and scale by joining with appropriate neighbouring councils to provide a better deal, a more attractive deal to keep these services going. So I encourage more of it.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Dowsley? No? Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I will go back to you, Councillor Landels. Would you like to sum up?
Yes, please. I'd like to firstly thank each of the providers who went through the procurement process, and it was quite, it was interesting as councillors to be briefed on what those offers were and the differences and the strengths and etc. between them. Belgravia Leisure, we've worked with for a number of years here at Indigo Shire, and I think it's very positive that they participated in that process and that they have been, that they're the recommended company to take on this next contract. And I wish them all the best with that contract. And I know that, the staff here, obviously at Indigo Shire, be quite familiar with working with them and with their systems. So it's a fair way. It's a few months away, perhaps in terms of a season starting and that kind of thing. There'll be a lot of discussions about that, but we've certainly got no doubt there'll be a lot of work going on over the next few months to make sure we get some agreement about what the season looks like, and there'll be discussions with the community about all that side of things as well.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13 is infrastructure services, and item 13.1 is the Capital Works Report, May 2026. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council notes the May 2026 Capital Works Report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd.
So we've passed the DMP, and I think a clear reflection to our tourists who come here and our community is how clean the toilets are and how they reflect our care, I suppose, for community and for visitors. So this is a pretty important. I've moved on to the toilets because they really move me. Capital Works report, I'll leave that for someone else for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll go to you, Councillor Landels, as the seconder. Would you like to speak to the motion?
You're the mover now.
Okay. Look, all I'd really like to say on this one is we're very close. Obviously, today is the last day of the financial year. So I know that we probably don't have an update on how we're travelling up until today on that particular Capital Works program for 2025-26. But the indication was that we would probably be within about 10% of the Q2 forecast on the Capital Works, which I know we all love that to be 100% every time. It's a multi-headed beast, I feel, capital works. There's so much involved in it, and we often think of it as grading of roads or resheeting or resealing programs and infrastructure, but it also includes purchase of fleet vehicles and a number of those works equipment and graders and all those sort of things that have to be maintained and upgraded and all that kind of thing. So I'm reasonably satisfied that given that and that's not even allowing for weather impacts, which can sometimes, obviously seasonal challenges can be predicted to some degree, but obviously there's a lot of unpredictability too within that. So I guess given that we're sort of on track to go to 90% of the Q2 forecast, I'm quite satisfied with that. And I'd like to thank all the staff that do all that work. It's out of the depots and right across the Shire, and as well as the staff here in the office that manage that program.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
The report states total capital expenditure of 6 million to the end of May against an initial budget, including carry forwards of 15.9 million and a Q2 revised budget of 8.1 million. The predicted end result is 7.5, which would land at around 90% of the Q2 forecast, which Councillor Landels has just mentioned, or 47% of the original 26-27 capital works budget. I'd like to ask a question of the CEO through you, Mayor. Given Council has delivered significantly less of its adopted capital works program than was originally budgeted, can the CEO please explain, will any changes be implemented to improve delivery performance for the next financial year?
Thanks for the question, Councillor, through you, Mayor Price. One of the things we did implement this year, which is, I think one of your suggestions actually, was to assess this year's capital budget line by line for deliverability in this year. So if you recall with the mid-year review, those projects that weren't delivered this year or weren't forecast to be delivered this year, each had its own explanation. And I'll note that I think very few, if any, of those explanations related to matters that really within our control or due to lack of resources, all those items related to external factors. So with the review of the budget for next year, that was a good opportunity to go through again line by line to confirm the deliverability of every project. So I think that's been a good process to work through, and we've got every expectation. I know your question wasn't quite about delivering next year's budget, but I think we've done the work. We've got the resources and the staff to deliver on the budget, and I've got every expectation that we will do that. Again, subject to external forces next year.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I would. I think we have 10% that we say 90% deliverability is okay. And we accepted the Q2 as a revised budget. So we are going against the revised budget. So from where I can see from the capital works, we seem to have improved our deliverability this last couple of months. But some of the issues have been that there's been curb and channel works delayed, budget pressures, as in the Beechworth Early Years Centre roof design has to happen, procurement cost escalation, so quotes exceeded the budget for the EV charger project and the lock replacement, and capacity challenges. So we've got large heritage and sport facility projects which will stretch staff capability and project management capacity. So all of those, I think, are are something that we can discuss and are easy to see what those hold-ups are and what's causing difficulties. So I think 90% is within our capacity.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those in favour is Councillor Burke, Harvey, Price, Shepherd, Landells. Those against is Councillor Horn and Dowsley. The motion is carried. Item 13.2 is contract number 257234, cleaning of Shire offices, buildings, public toilets and amenities. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 awards contract number 25/7234, cleaning of Shire offices, buildings, public toilets and amenities to Border Cleaning Services Proprietary Limited for 3 years, with the option of a 2-year extension for a year one price of $337,825 excluding GST, and approximate whole of contract 5 years price of $1.8 million excluding GST, and 2, authorises the CEO to sign the contract documents. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke.
No, just support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
I'll start again for the previous motion that I think the toilets are really important, and they do reflect to our tourists and our community our care. Like there's nothing worse, and so we're very aware that these the contractor has done a good job in the past and is very open to discussion and has done more above and beyond what they've been expected to do, and will contact us if there's something wrong, which isn't really in their remit. And they've also, we're very aware that our destination toilets from our public toilet strategy have been identified as requiring additional cleaning. So they are cleaned more on public holidays, when there's events, the maternal, child and health care centres as well require additional cleaning. So that's been included into the contract. So we're pretty happy with the service that they've provided, and we've done a comprehensive request for tender, but this company has again won this tender.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Landells.
Yeah, just on the toilets, one of the points I want to make is that I think a really good initiative is they have a QR code at all the toilets where you can give feedback if you notice there's a maintenance issue. And it's very easy. It just takes you to an online form that you can then quickly jot down whatever the issue is. And I think that's, in this day and age of QR codes and mobile technology, I think that's a really good initiative for to effectively get around to just, we're maintaining so many toilets across the Shire of various ages. Some of them are probably non-compliant as far as standards go, and then we've got some very new ones and what have you, but even the new ones sometimes have problems. So I just encourage your community, if you're out using one and it doesn't seem to be working, just have a look for that QR code.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you. Councillor Burke, would you like to sum up?
No, nothing to add, thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.3 is the proposed road closure of Hamilton Street, Rutherglen. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 declares its intention to implement a traffic management closure of Hamilton Street, Rutherglen on the southern side of Main Street. 2, places a public notice in accordance with Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 advising of Council's intention to close this intersection, inviting submissions for a minimum period of 28 days. 3, notes that a further report will be provided following the public submission process. And 4, notes the street will remain open to pedestrians, cyclists and other foot traffic under the proposed traffic management closure. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Landells, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Landells.
Thank you. This particular proposed road closure is quite an important one, I think, for this particular community in order to improve pedestrian safety and also road safety. There's and community and the need for it has become heightened, I guess, with the recent opening. When I say recent, I suppose it's over a year now, I guess, of the Glenview nursing home in this facility, and in this vicinity. And there's plans in the short term that we're constructing a footpath to safely transit our pedestrians from that facility up into the heart of town. So this particular street, Hamilton Street, is unsealed. It's not a widely or a particularly busy street, but it is accessible. It can tend to be viewed as a bit of a shortcut when there are other sealed roads that are much safer to use. And I guess one of the real concerns is that, apart from the pedestrian safety aspect, is that for vehicles who are, say, travelling north and entering, I guess they'll be going north to turn right or left onto the Chiltern-Rutherglen Road, they'd be doing so at roughly about a 30-degree angle. So it's very much angled, and that is always a concern with sight distance of vehicles, particularly which would be to the driver's right. So I think that there's, to close this one off, but still provide local access for pedestrians and cyclists is a good decision. And as I understand it, it's been well communicated to the local community, and it now goes out for a period of 28 days for further submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Endels. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
I think it's important to note that there will be a turning circle for larger vehicles at the end of the street for things like the garbage truck collection and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's a valuable thing for the community to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Endels. Would you like to sum up?
No, thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.4 is road naming new road off Warner Road, Beechworth. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council endorses the name of Alderdice Court for the unnamed cul-de-sac in the 11-lot subdivision at 33 Warner Road, Beechworth, for the purpose of community consultation, and 2 notes that a further report will be presented to council at a future meeting to make a final decision in relation to this naming process. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd?
Yes, the name Alderdice has been held in abeyance. We were going to use it previously, so it's been sitting in our list, waiting to be used, and it's in commemoration, really, of Kathleen Alderdice, 1880 to 1970, and she dedicated her life to community service in Beechworth. She was a local educator, curator of the Berg Museum, and a prominent leader in cultural organisations like the Beechworth Choral Society. Her long tenure as electoral registrar and her work with births, deaths and marriages further highlight her central role in local governance. I think it's important to note as well that our role is at the moment is to increase the commemoration of women in place naming by setting a level of 70% of new requests for commemorative naming of new roads, place names and landmarks to be achieved within the lifetime of the strategy. So I think it's a very suitable recommendation, and I think people will be proud to live in that street, and it's great that we're able to honour a local woman.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. I don't have a whole lot more to add apart from the fact that I think it's really positive that with the naming protocols that we're working under at the moment, that we're working closely with the local history groups who have access to a lot of valuable records that help council staff to and a place naming committee, and I think we have a place naming committee and a policy around this. So it's just really great to be able to work with the community. A lot of them are volunteers, but they're very passionate. They have a very deep knowledge of not just knowledge, but access to a lot of the records to help us do that search and come up with those lists of names for recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.5 is the place naming committee. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that one councillor appoints councillors blank to attend meetings of the place naming committee, which has been established through the adoption of the road and place naming policy in 2025, and two, the appointment of a council representative to the place naming committee be included on future agendas for the statutory meeting. Councillors, can I confirm that we've had interest in Councillors Landells and Councillor Horn to be both the member and the sub on that committee? So if whoever's moving the motion could move the motion with the words Councillor Landells and Councillor Horn as sub. I'd be pleased to have someone move a motion to that effect. Councillor Dowsley, seconded by Councillor Harvey. Just confirm, Councillor Landells, your interest, and Councillor Horn. Yep, great. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, look, this committee comes out of a policy that was adopted in August 2025. And this is just formalising which councillor representations will be on that committee. The committee will meet on an ad hoc basis when new naming requests or requirements come in. So it's not one that will meet periodically. And it will involve a number of different people on that committee. So I'm glad that Councillor Landells and Horn have put their hands up to be on that important committee.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder? Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to you, Councillor Dowsley. Would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14 is Office of the CEO, and item 14.1 is Advisory Committee Minutes. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council accepts the attached unconfirmed meeting minutes for the following advisory committee. 1, the Indigo Community Access Committee. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Landells, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would like to. I'm along with Councillor Burke, we're councillors on this particular advisory committee. I would like to just point out something that I should have checked when I was sent a copy of the minutes to review, and that there is a little bit of an error in that the location of the meeting was held in Chiltern, and it does say that it was held in Yakandanda. So I'd like to just apologise for not picking that up when the draft was distributed. I only picked it up at about 5 p.m. today. But having said that, it's obviously been a bit of a quiet month for the advisory committees, but this particular access committee has been, that particular meeting that I attended, it was a good, pretty active meeting. We've had a couple of new members, and I know we're going through a bit of a sort of restructure and looking at some of these, looking at advisory committees in general. But but this one, we get some good input from community members as well as council staff to help us look at important access issues, which are, in a shire like Indigo Shire, there's a lot of heritage regulations that have to be followed. There's often trying to come up with creative ways to get around difficult issues, whether it be heritage gutters and door entries in heritage precincts and stuff like that. There's a lot of challenges there, but I think that we often get presentations from staff and upgrades about various access issues that they're implementing from the Capital Works program and things like that. That's always really much appreciated as well.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. I'll go back to you, Councillor Landels. Would you like to sum up?
No, thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.2 is informal meetings of councillors' records. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillors' records. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to speak as seconded? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'll now vacate the chair.
Wrong button, sorry. Two buttons on this one. So I'll take over chairing for this particular item. The next agenda item is a notice of motion, and the motion is that Indigo Shire Council rescinds its decision at item 11.5 on the 19th of May 2026 in relation to a planning permit at Scott Street, Rutherglen, to allow time for the applicant to work with council and the Department of Transport and Planning regarding the proposed conditions. Do I have someone to move the motion? Councillor Price. Mayor Price still? Probably still Mayor Price. Thank you. Do I have someone to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So this is an odd item. This is a notice of motion, but it's a rescission. So at the May meeting, we approved a planning permit for a subdivision at Scott Street, Rutherglen. And after approving that planning permit and all of us speaking very glowingly to that item, we realised that the applicant was actually still in discussion about some changes to permit conditions, particularly in relation to intersection works with the Department of Transport and Planning. Now, it's very unusual for a councillor to intervene in a process like this. And so I will ask the Director of Planning and Corporate Services just what happened and why really something that is sort of a process issue in terms of council, but ultimately the responsibility falls with the councillor to rescind the decision and to undo the May decision. So what can you tell us about what happened in terms of this item?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was sitting here trying to think of a smarter way than to say it was a missed email. It was a simple mistake, and there was just a poor communication process on the day. So the information didn't get through to council that the conditions were still under some debate and some question. And there was a request from the applicant to defer the item to allow a bit more time to do that. We missed that. As I said, a simple mistake, a missed email. And so, yeah, we're quite keen for the rescission to be considered by council to just rewind the clock and give time for the review of that condition. The second part to your question was about why it then falls on council laws to rescind. And that's just a simple governance rule that if council made up of council laws makes a decision, it's not appropriate for staff to bring rescission notices into the chamber. once a decision of council is made, staff accept that decision 100% and go about implementing it. So it's really just council and councillors that can consider a rescission notice, but in this case, with the full support and thanks of the team.
Thank you, Director. So as I say, this item is quite odd. It's not only a notice of motion, it's a rescission. And I do find it quite odd for a councillor to have to undo the decision. I understand the reason why, but it should not be our common practice. We should be making decisions with all of the information available to applicants, objectors, councillors, council staff. And I'm certainly interested in continuing our discussions about making sure that our processes and safeguards are in place to make sure that when an item comes to a council meeting, that it's met all of those milestones so that everybody is fully informed of exactly where it's up to and clear on the item that's coming to council and why it's achieved that point. Because what didn't happen as a result of that is that without the applicant being aware that it came to council, they weren't able to make contact with us. There was no awareness that the item was on the agenda, so they weren't able to make contact with us to express that missed opportunity, the missed email or whatever did happen. So thank you to the applicant for reaching out, and once they did reach out, I've just re-engaged them with the planning department so as to stay at arm's length from the process, as councillors should be able to, so that we can stay in the appropriate position to continue to make planning decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to support this rescission motion. I'm not really aware of the circumstances of what the discussion is with the planning department or the developer. All I'm aware is that there's been a bit of a glitch in process, and if we're able to transparently fix that glitch by allowing the process to continue and then it come back to us, then I'm happy to support that. So, yep, that's why I'm seconding it. Yeah.
Thank you. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landels.
Yeah, probably just echoing perhaps what Councillor Shepherd said. I just feel it's a really important part of a process matter that the developer needs to be given that opportunity to discuss a particular condition with the Department of Transport and Planning, and by rescinding this particular decision, we then allow that to take place. And obviously it would have been ideal for us not to be rescinding a decision, but I think it's more important to have a fair process for the developer.
Would any other councillor? We've got Councillor Burke.
Yes, I just support this project to have good process. So it's just continuing the process, and we'll see how the whatever approval process is required. But at least they can continue on, and a glitch has happened, and it should be corrected.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No, then I'll go back to Councillor Price. Would you like to sum up?
Nothing further to add except to echo what other councillors have said. It's an unfortunate glitch. It's appropriate that we rescind it in this way. And what happens now is basically if the motion passes, then we treat the decision as though it didn't happen at the previous meeting, allow for the ongoing discussions to continue as they would have if the deferral had been granted at the May meeting, or if the item had not appeared on the May agenda. Councillors will appropriately remove themselves from any of those discussions, as we always are in the lead up to an item coming to council, and then it will return to a council meeting once all of those negotiations have happened between the applicant and council and referral authorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Price. We'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'll now vacate the chair.
Item 16 is councillor reports. Do any councillors have a report to make to the council meeting? Councillor Harvey.
Big voice. Three councillors attended the National General Assembly of the Australian Local Government Association. Mayor Price, Deputy Mayor Dowsley, and myself, and along with the Trevor Iarino, the CEO, and it was a very useful experience. It was my first time having been there, and I got a lot out of it. I'm very glad I went, very pleased. It was very tiring. It was a long days, and there was a bit of socializing went on in the evenings, and we had some long walks to get to various places. We got lost once, by the way. I seem to remember. No, never. And to me, it was the rivalry. Some things that I noted, there was you could see the urban regional divide with the councils. Although some of the problems are common, there still was a definite divide. In fact, on the first day, you were divided into urban in one room and regional in the other. And if we think we have problems, some of the problems that were brought to our attention by the outback councils, up in the way deep dark north, where they have an extremely large size. One of them was bigger than the state of Victoria and only had a few thousand people and virtually no rate base. And the condition of the roads, and it was mentioned, we had a discussion on trucks and the problems of increasingly large trucks using very bad roads that quite often get washed out, and how you're talking about the climate. Well, sometimes they'll fix the road one year and it gets washed out the next. And of course, one of the common problems was money. The talk about money. Everybody was none of us seemed to have enough money. In fact, at one stage, was it on Wednesday, I believe? We all went and stood on a big set of steps and had our photo taking, holding like little signs demanding that the federal government bring back our 1%. And that was a common theme, even though some prominent politicians came and talked to us. There was no commitment to raise our money to give us any more. And quite a lot of discussion about the restraints put on local governments. It really was information overload to me. A couple of things at the end of the conference that took my attention. This is the last day, the last session, which is practical tools for the modern council. One was payable research, that's payable without the A, about how they could spread out rate payments, how you different methods for collecting unpaid rates and so on. And one that really took my interest at the end was how to get that grant, which was by a Cullen Steele. He manages something called Section 51, and he's an ex-government bureaucrat. And he made a great point that you never ask the state or federal governments when you're going for a grant what they can do for you. You tell them what you're going to do for them. If we get this grant and this stuff, it's going to make the state better. If we get this, it's going to make Australia better. And he said there's even constitutional limitations on how much the federal government giving money to local governments. And it was a very interesting session. And this man got up and started speaking. It turned out on the first day, I looked for a quiet corner to eat my lunch because you sort of had to carry it around. And it turns out he's the bloke I ate lunch with on the first day. I didn't realize he was this person in the grants. One other very quick thing, the Indigo Shire Safety Committee. We had a meeting after the last council meeting. It wasn't all that encouraging. The police said there's nothing they can do about illegal tobacco sales, and there's very little they can do about electric scooters. And one thing that came out of it was we'd like to have team or Zoom meetings in future because the police spend an awful lot of time traveling to these meetings and traveling back, which time they could be spent doing police work. The sergeant from I think it's a sergeant from Beechworth was there, and he'd wasted a couple of hours of his day just in traveling when he should have been better off at least at the Beechworth station. And I believe the next meeting's going to be in Beechworth, so we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the meeting? Councillor Dowsley?
Thank you. Yes, I also was able to attend the National General Assembly at the last minute, and it's a really fantastic experience. I was able to go last year as well. And one of the themes, or the theme for this year's conference, was Stronger Together. And that really resonates because that is exactly what you get out of going to that conference. When I look at our advocacy plan that Mayor Price mentioned we've been reviewing this afternoon, and I look at the items on that list, we talk about quality healthcare or access to healthcare. We talk about enabling infrastructure. We talk about climate resilience funding, rate cap reforms, financial assistance grants, and emergency services and disaster sort of funding and relief. They're all things that all councils across the country are having issues with. And the way that we can advocate for these things is together. And we're have a much louder voice when we're talking about these things together. So although some of us have different challenges, an example is, we might have 5 pools in Indigo, but another shire, I think it was Bulio, has 5 aerodromes. So we have different problems, but they're similar problems. Ageing infrastructure, not fit for purpose. I think they were talking about Ambulance Victoria planes not being able to land on some of their aerodromes. And so we've all got these similar challenges. And I think the emergency motion that Councillor Harvey talked about in terms of the financial assistance grants just shows that we're all united, and every council voted on that motion. Some of the other highlights for me, Michael Teo, who some of you might know through Love on the Spectrum, did a keynote speech on inclusion for people with neurodivergency. And that was a really thought-provoking keynote address. I took some great learnings out of that in terms of the increased unemployment rate amongst our community with neurodivergency, and the challenges that can occur in going through usual sort of recruitment and employment processes, and what organisations can do to mitigate some of those challenges. That was a fantastic address. Also was fortunate enough to meet Mayor Mohammed Semra from Maribyrnong, who is, I believe, Australia's first refugee mayor at 27 years of age. Very inspirational. What a fantastic advocate he is. And really the benefit is just about making connections. So many really great discussions with people doing fantastic things around the state. Had a great discussion with someone from I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's the Southern Council's Climate Alliance, Council Alliance, about the work they're doing down there, advocating for their 9 councils. And yeah, just a fantastic experience, lots to take away, and to come back and have discussions with our officers and executive about those learnings.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. I attended as well. I won't cover the same ground that Councillor Harvey and Councillor Dowsley did. So in addition to everything that they've said, I went along to the Australian Local Government Women's Association breakfast. They're celebrating their 75th year as an association, and they talked about the fact that in 1952 there were 40 women councillors in all of Australia, and just how far they've come in that time. There were so much time for engagement with lots of different councils from all over Australia, and yeah, to compare some of our issues to theirs. When we talk about truck movements through our main street, there was Mayor Jack from the Roper Gulf in the Northern Territory said, we've got the 3 major highways that we have to travel between towns. They're all dirt and the trucks slip off the road. So it just really stark contrast and perspective in terms of all of the different parts of Australia. The Governor-General gave an address and talked about the fact that she sees local government as sharing the heart of Australian communities. She said that we do a really good job of presenting the light and shade of the country back to itself. We had meetings with ministers and people from departments alongside one of our other shires in the Hume Region Local Government Network, the Strathbogie Shire. We supported them as they went around talking about their bushfire recovery and the lack of funding that's made its way back into their shire. Although we realise that that's not a direct funding priority for ourselves, we realise that that funding, that disaster recovery and emergency management needs to work for Strathbogie as much as it does for ourselves, because the time will come where we will have to access that as well. There's a whole range of motions that get voted on at the national level, one of which we've referenced tonight in a petition. But I did want to recognise a significant change from last year's conference to this one in terms of the motions that were received was about AI data warehouses and councils coming to terms with what that means for them, the drain on power in their suburbs, where some suburbs are now experiencing blackouts that they haven't had before, the use of water, and just the complete inability of councils to be able to have much to say on the data warehouses at all. So there were some very strong motions moved at ALGA, very well supported. There's a lot more that I think we will feed back to the council as an organisation and to council laws in terms of direct learnings, tools that we can use from ALGA and other councils that we can link in with to share experiences, to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel in Indigo, that we're making sure it's informed by what best practice is across Australia. And that's just one of the many benefits we get from going to a conference like that. Would any other councillor like to make a report to the council meeting? No. I will now go to the Mayor's Diary, which is there for information and lists the functions, events and meetings for May 2026. After that is the Decisions Register, again for information, a report outlining actions from council resolutions as at the 19th of May 2026, including those not previously listed as completed, but not including resolutions to note a report. And then item 18 is general business. Do any councillors have any general business to raise with the council meeting? No? Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the meeting. So I will declare the meeting closed at 9:12 p.m. The next council meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 28th of July, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.